Welcome back, all you lovely people. I hope you had a nice little stretch there and now are ready to talk a little bit more about Aristotle. Well, I'll talk. You can think about Aristotle, I hope. Anyway, now in the last video, I'd concluded that happiness was going to be found in the proper functioning of our soul. And our soul functions properly when it is cultivated, it's cultivated according to excellence, arete. And Aristotle explains how this is going to look like in chapter 13 of book 1 of the Nicomachean Ethics. I'll just walk us through it here. Because just to be clear, though, I should say that Aristotle's notion of the soul is not religious at all. I repeat, Aristotle's notion of the soul is not religious at all. Because if you prefer, you can think about the Greek word here for soul is psyche, or psyche, if you prefer. And Aristotle does not believe that the psyche or the psyche is something separate from the body. The psyche is not a spirit. It's not something that goes on living after we die. That's not what Aristotle means when he's talking about it. Now, for Aristotle, our psyche or our psyche is about our psychological makeup. And indeed, of course, that's where the word, not surprisingly, the word psychology comes from, because the word psychology literally means study of the psyche, or the psyche, and study of the psyche. And so what Aristotle is going to do in chapter 13 of book 1 is a little bit of moral psychology, or if you prefer, because psyche means soul, Aristotle is doing a little soul-ology. I don't know why it cracks me up. So anyway, back chapter 13 of book 1 of Nicomachean Ethics is on pages 3, 4, and 5. If you just want to glance at that, this is what I'll be talking about. Because what Aristotle is doing there is looking at these different parts or aspects of the human soul, so that he can help us figure out what does it mean for our soul to have, to cultivate the excellences of our soul. Because remember, cultivating the excellence in a soul is going to make a properly functioning soul, and a properly functioning soul will live, according to happiness. The soul will have that activity of eudaimonia. And so now the first part of the soul, or the first aspect of the soul that Aristotle considers, is the non-rational aspect of our soul. As the name says, this is the part of our soul that is not itself rational. This part is concerned with our physical bodies, how our bodies grow, develop, how we reproduce, and of course, emotions, desires, and appetites go into all that part of the soul. But now Aristotle, this is kind of cool. Aristotle notes something interesting about this non-rational aspect of our soul. He notes that itself breaks down into two different parts. There is this plant-like aspect that we really cannot directly control. This is like the part of our soul that controls our heartbeat or our digestion or how our hair and fingernails grow. That's all that sort of involuntary stuff that we don't have direct control over. But Aristotle notes there's also this subservient aspect of the non-rational part. The subservient aspect is something that can actually be controlled by reason. And this part of the soul is that part driven by our feelings and our desires. And Aristotle says that, yeah, reason can guide and tame our feelings and desires. So that's the subservient part. And Aristotle he makes a kind of an analogy here. He says that subservient part, of our feelings and desires, that's like a child. But our reason can be like the parent that can train and guide the child. So our reason can be, something that can train and guide our emotions, our desires, our appetites. And so, for instance, a strong emotion like anger, when you're young could be like a strong, like an explosion, right? Where you go wild, breaking stuff, it's out of anger or whatever. But as your reason develops, your reason can tame your anger. So when you get angry, you can find more constructive ways to express that anger. And I've mentioned before that my dad is a therapist, and my dad always would say to me, I've probably told you this already, my dad would say to me, look, it's okay to be angry. Angry is a natural thing that we all experience, but what matters is what you do with that anger. Now, Aristotle will agree with all of that. Anger is natural, anger is powerful, but what matters is what you do with that anger, not whether or not you experience it. Because anger is natural. It's a part of human experience, which is Aristotle's baby here. He's talking about the human experience. So Aristotle will say, children cannot control or process their anger constructively. Usually not, anyways. And that's why children need parents who will show them how to properly express that anger until the child grows, and then their own reason finally starts to develop and take over. And then, yes, you have the adolescent, the young adult, can finally start processing their anger for themselves without needing, parental supervision for all that. And so, by the way, all this probably explains this. I find this passage a little funny, maybe is the word. It's in chapter 3 of book 1 there, where Aristotle says that young people shouldn't study ethics because young people don't know how to control their emotions. And of course, because Aristotle is sexist, he says for the same reasons that women can't study ethics either. Of course, we know better now. It's the men who are the emotional snowflakes. Silly. I kid. But anyhow, Aristotle, of course, is saying it's the mark of ethics is somehow controlling these emotions. And that's why young people, he thinks, will struggle studying ethics. But anyhow, back to this non-rational aspect of the soul. We've seen now. But now we can move on to the rational part of the soul, the rational aspect of the soul. And this part of the soul contains our intellectual abilities, like our ability to reason about mathematics and science. And this aspect of the soul, he will say, also contains our wisdom. And for Aristotle, wisdom concerns how we should act. So again, the rational part of the soul containing mathematics, science, wisdom, things like that. And once again, Aristotle is going to do something interesting. The rational aspect of the soul also has 2 parts. There is an executive aspect that reasons and gives commands, but there is also there it is, the subservient aspect again. Again, that aspect of our desires, but that can be controlled and regulated and guided by reason. So now we can put all these together into this one picture where we see these 3 aspects of the human soul. There's the executive aspect, which reflects our full power and abilities of reason. There's the subservient aspect, which is that overlapping part there, which is about our feelings, desires, and appetites, but it can also listen to and be regulated by reason. And then, of course, there's that plant-like aspect, which governs the more physical nature of our bodies. And so that's it. That's what Aristotle thinks makes us human, those aspects. And so now we can go back to that Aristotle's doctrine of the 4 causes. There it is. And so now we can appreciate how he understands the formal cause of the human being. Because we can ask, what is it? Well, it's a human. And then we can ask, well, what does it mean to be human? And he means it's a soul whose structure and organization has those aspects of being executive, being subservient, and being plant-like. And of course, Aristotle did this psychology, or Aristotle did this soulology, because he wants to identify the proper functionings of the soul. And the proper functioning of the soul is about developing your mind so that you can reason about things like math and science, but also it's about developing your mind so that you may govern your desires and emotions. And so now doing that, Aristotle says, is about cultivating the excellences of each of these aspects of the soul, because there will be these excellences of intellect. And I'll talk about those in the next module. But those excellences of intellect are about that rational executive part of the soul. But there will also be these excellences of character, which will be the excellences associated with your emotions, appetites, and other practical aspects of living a human life, with other human beings. And I'll start talking about those excellences of character in the next video. But before doing that, I'll just note that Aristotle does not mention anything about excellences of the body. He seems to think that such excellences aren't very interesting, since animals and even plants might have such excellences. But I think, look, hey, Aristotle could probably, if we asked him, he's dead a couple thousand years, but we could ask Aristotle, well, could there be excellences of like this plant-like? And he might talk about things like physical fitness and a good diet, right? Because fitness and diet do affect our bodies. But Aristotle would say, yeah, that's could be excellences, being physically fit, eating well, but that's not really ethics anymore. He'd say, get a physical fit trainer. So what Aristotle is going to talk about primarily are these excellences of character. And we'll see also a little bit about the excellences of the intellect. Because cultivating these excellences of character and intellect help our soul function properly. And again, the proper functioning soul is one that will live well and live happily. And so what does it mean? Okay, what does it mean to have excellence of character? But as always, I'm getting ahead of myself. I think it's time for a snack break. I could use a snack, because I guess my plant-like aspect of my soul could use something to munch on. So, hey, I'm going to listen to my plant-like aspect of my soul. You can do the same if you'd like, and then we'll come back and we'll talk a bit more about excellences of character. See you back here in a moment.